Hey everyone, welcome back to another Worth a Second Chance community check-in. Today I'm joined by Sanne, who's kindly offered to share some of her knowledge with us. So thank you so much for being here, Sanne, and welcome.
Hi Jess, thanks for having me.
No worries. All right, so if you could start by giving us just a little bit of context about your role and what it is you do day to day before we jump into some questions.
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently a research fellow at the University of Melbourne, School of Population and Global Health in the Centre for Mental Health. And in my role there, I work on national evaluation projects. So last year I worked on a evaluation around primary mental health care. And at the moment, I'm working on a national evaluation on suicide prevention. And I guess on the side, I also do some work in the youth justice space. So I moved to Melbourne about 2 or 3 years ago from the Netherlands, where I worked on a evaluation of the small-scale youth justice facilities there. So I think you spoke with Fleur previously, so I worked with her briefly in the Netherlands, and then when I moved to Melbourne, I started working on a project with my partner who works in architecture around, I guess, looking at best practice facilities around the world, and we've put together some design guidelines around that for Victoria.
Awesome, amazing. Well, I'm hoping to speak to you about these small scale facilities today. So obviously we did speak to Fleur already, so if anyone hasn't watched that video, I would highly recommend going back and hearing more about how that went in the Netherlands. But I was wondering if you could speak to why a facility like that might be good in Melbourne, or why it is, why you think we need one. And for someone who might be thinking, you know, we have justice facilities, we're building one out in Cherry Creek, just past Werribee. What is the difference between them, and why is it that we need small scale facilities over big prisons?
Yeah, sure. It's not a simple answer to question to answer. I'll do my best. So I guess I started thinking about what do we expect the youth justice system to do, or what do we expect in specifically the custodial system. So really what we want is to divert young people away from a life of crime, or further entrenching them in the justice system, with, I guess, custody being the most severe intervention for a young person. And ideally, we would want very small numbers of our young people in custody, or maybe even zero young people, if that's a possibility. And so when you look at, I guess, important factors within a young person's life that play a role and, I guess, help a young person either choose a different life path or to stay away from any offending behaviours, we, for example, see that education and school is really important, social connections to the community and to their family. So when you then look at, I guess, large-scale facilities that are often pretty far away from the community and from a young person's community, that actually is counterproductive, I guess, in maintaining or building those things, those elements that play such an important role in helping a young person develop a different life path, or I guess to promote like healthy, positive development, adolescent development. So yeah, when we start thinking about the ideal youth justice facility, I guess we want like a safe and healthy environment for both young people and for staff. And what we see in our current facilities, there's several reports that highlight that actually at the moment it's not that safe for either staff or for young people. And yeah, we want to support staff in developing positive relationships. It's important that we can have individual approaches. So that's where I guess the size plays a role, and where sort of smaller facilities, it's more easy to have that individual approach and to build that personal relationship with young people. And when we think about maintaining social connections or maintaining connections to school and education in the community, that also becomes more difficult when a facility is further away. Family has a harder time visiting, and even, I guess, the youth support services that have to access that young person, that becomes a bit more difficult as well. And so when we look at, I guess, best practice facilities in Europe and in the US, we see that small-scale, local or community integrated facilities are actually much better equipped to build and maintain those elements that play such an important role in a young person's lives. And on top of that, I think when we think about the goal being a small number or maybe even zero young people in these facilities, so decarceration effectively, we need facilities that are flexible and adaptable. And I guess when you have a large scale facility, it's not really best equipped to sort of respond to that, or to be flexible and adaptable when the needs change. So yeah, those are just a few things that come to mind.
Yeah, sorry, I set you a very big question, but you did a really amazing job of answering it. And I think that makes a lot of sense on all parts, but particularly about being in the community. And we know the strength that is gained by keeping young people connected, not only to their families and their friends, but also to, you know, healthcare services and school, like you said, such a protective factor. And to disrupt that is counterintuitive. So it just makes so much sense. So we hear the word therapeutic used a lot in youth justice settings. What does this look like on a practical level in the context of a small scale youth justice facility?
Yeah, so I guess when we say therapeutic, we mean having a good effect on body and well-being and health. And we see that a lot of young people in custody struggle with mental health problems and have experienced trauma and neglect. So it's really important to think about providing a therapeutic environment. And the way we have thought about it in the design guide is, I guess there's sort of several layers to it. So there's good design. So we can think about having access to nature or gardens, but also good ventilation, having access to natural light. And then secondly, you can take that a little bit further and say the environment shouldn't do any further harm to the person in that environment. And then when you take that even a little bit further, and I think that's sort of where the therapeutic part comes in, is that the environment can actually play a role in reducing stress and actively promoting well-being. And so what we've seen in the small scale youth justice facilities is that basically they look like a living space. They kind of look home-like, because, yeah, I guess those elements that play a role in well-being are actually the elements that we've applied to our homes, which makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that ties sort of perfectly into the next question. But before I dive into that, I just wanted to say that I think that access to natural light and environment and nature is something that we really underestimate, I think, but I've read the research on it, and it is just incredible and remarkable. And we have that kind of data saying that, you know, just having access to a bit of green space in our room, for example, can really, you know, boost well-being. Well, when our well-being's boosted and we're feeling better mentally, we're going to make better choices and we're going to be motivated to take care of ourselves. And it's just also interconnected. So to see this holistic approach is really exciting. So what do these different youth justice spaces communicate to a young person? So if we can put ourselves into the headspace of being a young person in a space, say like Parkville or something, So we picture prisons as being quite stark, but why might we design that one that is comfortable and home-like? So you kind of touched on that already on we design our homes to be homely because they make us feel safe and good. And we talked about nature, natural light, but are there any other elements that are important? And in your evaluation, did you get any feedback from the young people around how the environment made them feel? Because I have this assumption that if you're in a space that's nicer and that looks more like a home, that you feel more worthy of having those things in your life. And it also, it's sort of a demonstration from us as a sector saying you are allowed these things. You're allowed nice things and access to a nice space. Is that something that you've found? Sorry, I asked like 3 questions in one.
No, I think you're completely right there. So when we think about the sort of large scale or more high security facilities that we usually see, we're actually communicating to that young person that they're being punished. But I think even further than that, we're communicating that they're a criminal and that they're an offender. So that really reinforces for a young person who's still developing their sense of self, their identity, that reinforces that idea that they are a criminal. Which again, when we think about what do we want from the custodial youth justice facilities, we want to divert them away from a life of crime. So we want them to be able to imagine themselves as a normal, healthy young person with the ability to achieve their life goals. And what we're actually doing when we're communicating that element of punishment and sort of reinforcing that identity as a criminal, we're actually creating the opposite, I guess. We're not allowing them to imagine themselves as a healthy teenager who has the ability to achieve their life goals. So I think why it's important, or what's important about the small scale youth justice facilities, it's I guess they convey a sense of safety and stability in being home-like. And I think what's important to mention, because sometimes you hear people kind of thinking about small-scale facilities or home-like facilities, it shouldn't be a holiday. They're not on a holiday. But even though the environment or the design might be more home-like, it doesn't mean it's a holiday. It's actually not a holiday at all. So I think the larger scale facilities allow young people in that space, because it's so large scale, and they're just one of many young people and one of many young persons, it's easier to dissociate a bit, I think, in that space, and dissociate a bit from why you're there or what you're supposed to do. So in that sense, a small scale facility is not a holiday at all, because there's a lot of focus on thinking about your goals and what you want to achieve, thinking about your behavior, reflecting on your behavior. And that's definitely something that we've heard from young people that we've met in these small scale facilities. And sometimes they even say, oh, I prefer a large scale facility because I need to talk all the time here, and I don't like talking. So yeah, I think, so while the environment is home-like, because you want to create that sort of sense of safety and stability, it's not like a holiday at all. They're actually doing a lot of work around reflecting on themselves, on their behaviour, and on their life goals.
Absolutely. I think that's the hard work, and something that in large scale facilities, professionals don't have the opportunity to do. And yeah, it's kind of ironic, that thought that it's a holiday, isn't it? Because like I've spent a bit of time in Parkville working with young people in that centre, and it's very easy for them to slide under the radar and to not be accountable and to just kind of do whatever they're feeling like doing. And not that that's a holiday, it's an incredible form of punishment, but in comparison, it is easier, I think, for them to just sort of not reflect on what, they've done and be accountable, which is, I think, what the community generally wants, is them to reflect on what they've done and to change and make those changes. But I think we also assume that harsh punishment and shame equals change in a young person or any person, but it's not exactly how it works, is it? And I think I also wanted to just draw out how you spoke to a young person developing their sense of self and their identity. And it's a really dangerous time for them to be identifying with going to prison and with being an quote unquote offender, because they are looking for a way to relate to the world. And so if they're going to identify and be like, this is where I come, it's where I belong, it is super dangerous, because it's really hard to get out of any patterns when you identify with that kind of label. My last question for you, Sanne, is self-esteem is something that isn't often spoken about in the media or in general when it comes to young people in the justice system. Could you speak to why you included self-esteem and coping mechanisms as key factors that will prevent reoffending?
Yeah, sure. Again, I guess we want to help young people achieve their life goals without engaging in crime or inflicting harm on people. And we see that young people in custody often have a history of trauma and abuse, and they struggle with mental health problems, and also often come from, I guess, social disadvantaged backgrounds. And their offending behaviours or crime is often also a response to a lot of those difficulties. So I think we need to sort of acknowledge that there are broader psychosocial factors that play a role in this young person's life. Not to say that that would be an excuse, but I think it would be, I guess, oversimplifying it if we would ignore those factors as well. And so we've looked at using a resilience framework or resilience theory to look at how youth justice facilities can best help young people achieve their life goals. And so resilience being the ability to respond to adversity in life using or utilising your social and emotional skills. And so that's where self-esteem and coping mechanisms play a really important role. And it also offers, I guess, a more holistic approach to the whole thing. I think I feel like I kind of diverted. I think I kind of drifted off a bit, but so I guess when you acknowledge that those psychosocial factors play a really important role, and that taking that more holistic approach and acknowledging that young people have and experience a lot of adversities in their life, we want to equip these young people to be able to respond to that and work through that. So in order to do that, you want to build their self-esteem and you want to build their coping mechanisms.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that we forget that like young people don't want to be in that setting or identifying with that behavior. They just want to feel like they belong and they have hopes and dreams. And I think often they are really quite resilient, but they're not given the language and then the toolkit to kind of frame that resilience and then utilize it. Because I think it comes back to self-esteem a lot of the time. Like I've worked one-on-one with young people in the justice system, and they don't go after the opportunities that they're given sometimes because they don't feel like they're worthy of them, or because they think, what's the point, or I couldn't do that, or I'm dumb, I can't do that kind of stuff. And so I think before anything else, they have to have that sense that they're worthy of it, that they're capable of it, that they can do it, and a belief in themselves. So I think I really liked seeing that in the report that I read from you around esteem being a really key factor. All right, well, I think that is all that we have time for. I could chat to you for ages about this, but I think we'll leave it at that. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today, Sanne.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.